And I wake up and I sit up in bed and I look at the end of my bed and he's standing there. And I'm thinking, how did he get into my house? And I was like, kind of, tipsy, from sleep. And I laid back down. He was laying next to me, holding me in his arms. And he looked at me and he said, I'm going to get choked up even after these years. He said, I'm so sorry I hurt you. I really do love you. And he leaned in and he kissed me. And I could feel his lips on my lips. I could feel his embrace. I could hear his voice. And he said, he leaned back and he looked at me into my eyes for a long time. And he said, I came to tell you goodbye. And he disappeared.
I'm here today with Sue Dontell. Sue is a registered nurse and had a near-death experience in 1996. Sue has encountered numerous after-death communication occurrences. She comes here to share a message of hope and comfort for anyone who has lost a loved one or is facing death. Sue, thank you so much for being my guest today. I'm really honored to have you.
Thank you.
So tell me how this all got started for you.
Well, I've had dreams ever since I was a kid, and later it would actually happen. And I've always had, like just kind of messages or feelings, intuition, things like that, and have brought me to certain places at certain times to save a life or whatever. Just um, I've had them all my life. Maybe it's a smell, or maybe it's um, a feeling, a dream that happens later. So I've had a lot of those type things. The brain tumor thing, it was just very, very strange when I was going to doctors for years, or no, not year, but year and a half, I'd say. And I went from doctor to doctor to doctor, and nobody could tell what was wrong with me. And I was seeing my GI doctor, and he was running all these tests. At least he listened to me. I said, there's something wrong with me. And so he said, well, we've looked at everything but your head. He said, I can send you up to Mayo Clinic or whatever. And I said, well, let's, I said, there's one more thing. Uh, I keep forgetting words. I can't tell you the word for what's happening. And he said, well, explain it to me, describe it. I said, well, the only word I can think of is I'm listing. He said, you're listing? And I said, yeah. And I went like this because I was off balance. So he said, well, we can, send you to a neurologist. And I called the neurologist. They couldn't see me for 4 to 6 weeks. I went back and I said, you got to do something. There's something bad wrong with me. And he said, well, I'll order the MRI so you'll have it when you go to see the neurologist. So I said, okay. So I went and I had the MRI, and the doctor came down, the radiologist, and he said, you have a brain tumor. I'm like, yeah, okay, what's the punchline? He goes, no, has anybody in your life ever had a brain tumor? And I said, yeah, my mom 20 years ago. He said, that's it, you have a brain tumor. And he said, I can't let you leave the hospital because you could be gone like that, you know. And I'm like, and it was my birthday. I'm like, oh, happy birthday to me. So they sent me directly to the neurosurgeon. And he looked at me and said, make your legal arrangements. He said, if you survive, you might not be able to walk or talk, or, and he gave me all the things that doctors have to give you that could go wrong. Um, so I was in what they call the holding room before they take you into surgery. And my family was there and all. And I felt like I was in a bell, like, the hearing, it just was like you're in a bell. And I just kept hearing the 23rd Psalm over and over again in my head. And that's all I could hear. And so then, people were saying, I can't believe you're so calm. But I had this calm overtake me, and I can't explain it because I should have been scared on my wits. So they took me to surgery, and during the surgery, I don't know what happened, but I was looking down on me on the table. I could tell you where everybody was, what they were doing, what they were saying. It was like, I don't know, out of body or near death or whatever. But luckily I survived. And then I went on to, like I said, as the after death communication. I was doing hospice dog therapy, where I take my dog and go to different nursing homes and talk to them, and bring them comfort with the dog. And this dog was very, very in tune to people. Um, like she's a little high energy, but she calmed down around the people. And the one lady, I was walking by because it looked like she was sleeping. The dog pulled me into her room and went and laid her head right next to her. And the lady died the next day. So while I was doing this, it was volunteer hospice with the dog, and we had meetings every month. You had to attend so many meetings. But at one meeting, there was this man there, and his name was Bill Guggenheim. Him and his wife wrote a book called Hello from Heaven about after death communication, and they interviewed hundreds of people. And back in the day when they were doing the interviews, we didn't have this. It was long distance then. That it was out of his dime, but it ended up being a bestseller book. And so I met him there at the meeting in 1999, bought his book, and he autographed it for me. So I didn't really think much of it, but I still continued. And I thought, well, I believe him because I've had these experiences of, a smell leading me someplace. It was my grandmother's. She used to get home perms, and there's no smell like that. And it just led me to save my niece. But anyhow, there's a lot of them like that. So I had been engaged to a man. We lived together for 4 years, and it was a bad time for me because I was working full time. I was building a house. I was finishing up my BS degree, and I was so busy. So we hadn't got around to making the arrangements for the wedding. And when he had asked me to marry him 4 years prior, he had wanted to have children, and I told him I could no longer have children. I had a son from a former marriage, and he was good with that. He said, is all I need is you. I love you, and your son. That's good enough. So I said, okay, if you're sure. And he said, yeah. So after 4 years, one day he comes home from work and says, oh, I decided I want to have kids. He had met a 19-year-old and decided that that's what he wanted. So he left and he went back to Oklahoma, dumped her, met somebody else, married them, had a couple kids. And I never heard from him or talked to him or his family in decades. So one night I'm asleep and I wake up and I sit up in bed and I look at the end of my bed and he's standing there. And I'm thinking, how did he get into my house? And I was like kind of, tipsy, from sleep. And I laid back down. He was laying next to me, holding me in his arms. And he looked at me and he said, I'm going to get choked up even after these years. He said, I'm so sorry I hurt you. I really do love you. And he leaned in and he kissed me. And I could feel his lips on my lips. I could feel his embrace. I could hear his voice. And he said, he leaned back and he looked at me into my eyes for a long time. And he said, I came to tell you goodbye. And he disappeared. And I woke up screaming, like, come back, come back, So the next morning, I was like, a cat on a hot tin roof. I was walking around and I was like, how did this happen? It felt so real. I mean, I could see him, I could hear him, I could feel him. And so I went to my computer and I opened it. I typed in his full name and his birth date, and his obituary came up. Now, there's no way I could have known that he died had it not been for my experience, my after death communication the night before. So I had that book from Bill Guggenheim, and he happened to live over in Longwood, Orlando. I live in Cocoa, Florida. And I called him up and I said, I told him about it. And he said, I have to see what he called it. He called it the sleep state or visions, where you actually, and he says it usually only happens to people that are very, very close together, like spouse or whatever, and this man was my soulmate. So he came over and I did an interview with him, and he talked about the 12 different types of after death communication. And so I took that film to a film festival. And I was a little embarrassed to show it because people have, if they haven't experienced something, they don't understand it or believe it. To me, perceptions are reality, and your reality is based upon your lifetime experiences. This is my experience, so I believed it. It was real, you know. So I was a little embarrassed. People might think I'm nuts or something, but I had more people come up to me after that film and say, I want to tell you my story, because they had experienced things like that. But it's kind of like something that you keep behind closed doors. You don't talk about outright because some people just don't believe it. But in Bill's interview I did with him, he said that a lot of these experiences, different type of the 12 types, he said they bring you comfort, hope, and healing if you've lost a loved one. What Bill explains is that we all wear this earth suit. Our body is our earth suit. And he says, when you pass, you leave the earth suit behind, but your spirit still remains. And that's how people are able to communicate with you after death. He says, you know, dreams like that are like no other dreams. They're so real. And he says, like normal dreams, if you don't write it down right away, you forget it, you know. But he said, this dream will stay with you 20, 30 years. And it's just like it happened just yesterday. It's that real and that emotional, you know. And you know, this was, like I said, he died in 2019, yet you see how emotional I still get talking about it because it was so real. And like I said, he was my soulmate, my true love. And it was hard, but in another way, it's comforting because now I know that my spirit will remain after I pass. You know, so it brings you hope and comfort knowing that that your being, your you know, your soul, your spirit is still here afterwards. And so it was a very enlightening experience, and um, just it was so dramatic. You know, it's hard to explain how it changes people. You know, because and he talked in the interview about some people that are, you know, wanting to commit suicide, that this spirit will come to them and change their whole perception, and they won't commit suicide. And he said it's especially comforting to people that have lost a loved one, especially if it's a child. And he, you know, like I said, he talks about the different types of communication, whether it's a smell or a sight. You know, it might be, and this is really interesting because, you know, they talk about like red robins are supposed to be a sign, you know. And before I had the dream, I was in my garage and I was doing some sanding and staining and stuff. And and I have a feeder out back, and sometimes I'll have, you know, a cardinal come in and they'll take and fly away. They never stay. There was this cardinal by my garage, walked into my garage and just stood there. And, you know, I'm thinking maybe that's my dad who had passed, you know. And so and he stood there for a really long time, and then he flew up to a tree and still kept looking at me. And now I'm thinking it was probably, you know, my deceased loved one. um, but you know, he talks about, you know, that people might be, well, one of the things he talks about is the smell. Okay, so one day I'm driving on the interstate to my mother's. It was Mother's Day, and she said she was going to be home. I said, I'm bringing you a gift up. So I head up the interstate, and all of a sudden I smelled something, smelled like a home permanent. And I'm thinking, you know, there's nothing outside, there's nothing in my car that would smell like a home permanent. And I actually said out loud, Nana, are you here? Are you trying to tell me something? And so I got to my mother's house and she wasn't there. And she had just told me she's going to be there. I'm thinking, okay. Well, I thought, well, I'll go visit my sister. My sister has irritable bowel. She never leaves the house. And she had just moved down. I didn't know her husband that well. I'd only met him at the wedding because they had moved out of town. So I get to my sister's house. She's not there. I'm like, what is going on? You know, where are you leading me? So I get back in my car, start heading up, and it starts raining really hard, thundering and rainstorm. And I see this bicycle go by me with a man riding the bike. And as I looked, there was this little child huddled to the back of his, his back. And I thought, nobody's stopping for these people. I mean, there were cars, it was crazy. So I thought, I can't let them go in the rain. I've got to, turn around and try to find them and offer them a ride. So I did. I turned around and I didn't see them at first. I kept driving because I was going to go up and turn around. I thought maybe somebody picked them up. I got up there and I saw them. And I turned around and rolled my window down. I said, "Excuse me, sir, can I give you a ride?" And he looked at me and his hair was stringy in his face. He looked up at me and he said, "Sure." So put the bike in my actually I had a truck, put it in the back of the truck, and he got in there and he stood there with his daughter. And all of a sudden I realized this is my brother-in-law and my niece. My sister had left to go look for them the other direction. And I really feel like my grandmother led me there because the series of events, the smell, my mother not being home, my sister not being home, and then seeing them on the bicycle and rescuing them. So that was a really cool experience. And um, as a nurse, I had a little girl that died in my arms, and we had gotten really close. And she had a favorite song. And every time I got in my vehicle, that song came on. I don't care where I was or what time of day, that song would always come on. And I kind of felt like she was there, tell me she was okay, And when my dad died, my girlfriend went with me. We went over to his home. I was looking through his clothes, a lot of casual clothes. He liked Western wear, and I'm trying to lay all this stuff out. And I was just getting really frustrated because nothing seemed suitable for a, a viewing. So I threw my hands up in the air and I said, "Dad, what do you want to wear?" And it was like my body was overtaken. And I was mesmerized in this coma or whatever. I just turned around and I walked into his other bedroom, walked back to the back of the closet, stuck my hand in the closet like I was being led there. I pulled out a three-piece suit for him to wear. My girlfriend said, "You're scaring the stew out of me." She said the hair on the back of her neck was standing up because it was like I was out of body or something. I don't know how to explain it, but I have a lot of these things. I had a dream not too long ago. I had a dream years ago that my uncle, and he was on the ground and it had to do with his heart. I could see that it had to do with his heart. And at work, they used to call me a witch because I would go in and I'd say, "Oh, well, we're going to have a C-section today and it's going to be a boy," and it would happen. So they started calling me a witch because I could tell them what was going to happen. So I had this dream about my uncle and I knew not to let it go. So I go over to my parents' house and I said, "Have you talked to Uncle Tom lately?" And they said, "No, he's living over in Tampa." I said, "Well, I had a dream about him. Why don't you call him?" So they tried to call him, the phone was busy. So I went in the other room and I told my sister, I says, "I don't always know how to interpret my dreams. I wish I did." But I said, "I dreamed that Uncle Tom died, something to do with his heart." I said, "You got to make sure that Mom calls Uncle Tom and make sure that he's okay or that he goes to a doctor and gets it checked out." So before I left, I said, "Don't forget to call Uncle Tom." 2 weeks later, my mother calls me. She goes, "Oh, poor Uncle Tom." I said, "He died, didn't he?" And she goes, "Who told you?" I says, "Mom, remember my dream?" I said, "Did you ever call him after I left?" She goes, "No, we forgot." You got to listen to your dreams. Had another one just a few weeks ago. It was about one of the members in our car club. Same thing, heart. So I felt really weird about sending him an email. And I said, "I hope you don't think I'm crazy or anything, but I had this dream." I said, "Would you just, make me feel more comfortable, go to a doctor and get it checked out?" Well, here again, the hands of unknown put me at a gas pump right next to him. And there was like, I don't know, a dozen gas pumps or more, I don't know, big station. And I was parked right next to him. And I said, I am so sorry about my email. I said, I hope you don't think I'm some kind of a nutcase. I said, but I have to listen to my dreams. He said, well, he says, nobody knows this, but I have, um, oh, my brain doesn't, sometimes I can't get my words out because of my brain damage from the brain tumor. But he said, I have stents. That's what it was, stents in my heart. He says, my doctor told me it's about time to get them changed. I said, change them right now. I said, don't wait. And so he did, and he's fine. But it really scared me because I'm not close to this guy. I mean, I know him from the club, but I just had to tell him because I would feel so guilty if I had a dream and I didn't tell somebody about it. And I've had some dreams that, like, and I'll never forget this one. I can see this kid's face. He's got red hair and he drowned, but I don't know him. I didn't know who to do to. It really bothered me, for a long, long time. So anyhow, I have a lot of things like that. But, like I said, the most dramatic was that my soulmate came back after he died, you know, to apologize, to tell me he loved me, and to tell me that he had died. And so it'll knock your socks off, if something like that happens to you. A lot of people, they're so stimulated by all this excess, they're always on their phone, or they're playing music, or watching TV, or doing activities that their mind never rests. Because I've always been kind of, you know, uh, a loner type thing, because I used to be in horses before the brain tumor. I was ride my horse out to the woods and just let my mind think and explore, and a lot of times at night, when you sleep, a lot of these things will come to you because that's when your mind is more at ease. And that's when Mark came to me. But you have to kind of clear your mind and be cognizant of these things. Uh, I did go one time to see, what's the guy's name, that the psychic, Edwards. I went to see him one time. He didn't call on me, and here I had a spirit right next to me. But anyhow, that's basically, my story.
That's a beautiful message of hope and inspiration, especially for people that have lost close loved ones, to know that they are still somewhere, that they haven't just,
Mhm.
disappeared into oblivion, and that we'll see them and they're with us.
Right.
You talked about there's 12 different ways of communicating, and you talked about you get a lot of the smells and dreams and visions. What other types of communication are there?
Well, like finding things, like this woman kept finding dimes, and it meant something to her, something with her loved one. Or it'll lead you to find uh, jewelry or documents. Or he talks about some of them. Sometimes you can see like a 35 millimeter, and sometimes you can see whole bodies. Sometimes you can just see faces. Sometimes it's uh, auditory. You can hear something, or something will come to you, like the red cardinal that I talked about. Um,
I actually think this is such important information because death and afterlife communication is so taboo. It is almost shunned in our society. And often I see so many people that comment something on Facebook or on one of my videos that they've lost a loved one and they haven't gotten any communication. And so for people to be aware that there's all kinds of different types of communication. It doesn't have to be like watching a video or seeing something with your eyes. There's a plethora of different ways that they communicate with us. I think that can help people start their healing process.
right,
And I
right,
wish that we could open up this topic and have conversations about it. And that's, why I appreciate you coming on to talk about your experiences, because it can be the beginning of a lot of people's healing journey if they hear your story. Like it was when you were at the conference. So many people came and talked to you.
yeah. Because, like I said, it is one of those things that's kind of kept in the closet, so to speak. Like suicide. That's another film that I made, because a lot of people, the stigma attached to suicide, and and I had experienced my roommate, and so um, people feel uncomfortable talking about it, but it shouldn't be kept in the closet because there's a lot to be learned about it, what causes suicide and everything. But that's not your subject, so I'm not going to get into it. But um, but yeah, uh, it needs to be brought out. People need to, because like I said, all these people came up to me. They don't tell people about these experiences because um, people think they're not. Well, just like I said, I was hesitant to take this film to the film festival because I thought people would think that I'm nuts, and you're not. It was real. It was just as real as me looking at you. That's how real it was. I mean, it was totally earth shattering, and it has stayed with me uh, for all these years since 2019. Yeah, yeah.
Now, when did you said that you had experiences like this for a long time. When did you realize that they were after death communications?
I don't know really. I just knew that because the first ones were dreams that would later happen. And I just thought, oh, maybe I'm what they call psychic or psychotic or whatever. And so I really didn't connect it, I don't think. But the smell of my grandmother's home permit, that because it led me to my niece and saving her from because there was thunder and lightning. They could have got hit by lightning. That one kind of started me toward it. But and of course I had, you know, gone to Bill Guggenheim's lecture and thought that was very interesting. And I knew that I had had these other experiences. But when my soulmate came to me, and it was so real, and it's not really like you're asleep, it's like you're in this twilight where you're not asleep and you're not awake. And yet, when I sat up in bed, I was awake. But then when I lay back down, I was kind of asleep. But then I was awake. And then when he left, I sat straight up screaming. I was really awake then. But before then, you weren't like that deep, deep sleep and you weren't awake. You were kind of in between. And that's where all the communication took place. But it was something I'll never forget, ever.
So it's almost like there's this ideal state of consciousness somewhere in the twilight zone
Yes.
where you can connect your consciousness or they can come and connect with you.
When your brain is, you don't have a lot on your brain. Um, you got and when my grandmother's smell came to me of her home perm, I was in my truck driving up the road, so there was no real distractions. um, and I didn't have music on or anything, and that's when I could smell that there's nothing like a home permanent smell. And I said to her out loud to myself, Nana, is that you? What are you trying to tell me? And it was like she led me for my mother to be gone, my sister to be gone, and for me to drive where I was at that time and place to find my brother-in-law and my niece and to rescue them. I mean, it's just, it's unexplainable. And like I said, I wish that I could harness this the way that psychic does, John Edwards. But I can't. I don't know how to make it happen. It just happens. Yeah.
So is this like a special gift that you have, or is this something that anybody has?
I don't know. I really don't. I don't know. I'm certainly no John Edwards, uh, but I'm not. I mean, because like my mother says, she never dreams. I always dream. You have to dream, but I don't know. I just really don't know.
I would like to go ahead and share Bill Guggenheim's 12, let's see what he calls it, 12 signs of the beloved from deceased love, 12 signs of the beyond from deceased loved ones. Because I do think that the way they communicate with us, knowing the different ways they communicate with us is kind of key because as you're going throughout your day, you may notice something and remember that was one of these 12 signs. So I'll read them from There's website, and this website is guidepost.org. You can look up Bill Guggenheim. Number one is sensing a presence. Sue, have you ever sensed a presence?
Yeah, well, yeah, absolutely. Oh, and I mean, my loved one's still with me. I mean, I'll smell his cologne on his side of the bed sometimes, or I'll feel him, or he'll sing me a song. It's "Do You Love Me Now That I Can Dance?" And I'll walk into a certain place and I'll hear that song, and I know he's there because I taught him how to dance. That's how I met him. I was doing a two-step, which is a country wall, not a waltz, but a something like that. Anyhow, he wanted to learn how to dance so he could dance with me. And I always hear that song and I know he's there. And sometimes I can feel him, just feel his presence.
And number two was hearing a voice. Do you hear voices?
Well, I definitely did when he came to me.
Yes,
And
for
like I
sure.
say, I do hear him singing that song to me. A lot of times he'll be in the bedroom. That's where he came to me. And I'll walk into the bedroom and I'll hear that, you know, "Do you love me now that I can dance?" I don't know if you're familiar with that song. I can't sing, but it's
I do.
"Do you love me? Do you love me? Do you love me now that I can dance?" But that's what I hear a lot of times, and I can hear that, and I know he's there.
Yeah, I love that song. It was on the Dirty Dancing soundtrack.
Is that
That
really?
was, yeah, that was one of my favorite movies when I was a kid. So yeah, that's a good song.
Yeah.
And then this one I know you've experienced. It's 3 of 12. It's touch.
Hmm.
You felt the lips.
Yeah, I felt his lips on. I felt his embrace. I felt his lips on me. Yeah, definitely.
Now, have you ever felt touch while you're not in that kind of twilight zone, while
Yeah,
you're wide awake?
sometimes it's real gentle, but I'll feel a hug.
And then this one you've definitely experienced while you were wide awake. 4 of 12 is fragrance.
Uh-huh. Yeah, the home perm. One of the nurses, when Bill was giving his speech, she said she always smelled baby powder. She had lost her baby, um, you know, very, very young. And she says every now and then she'll smell the baby powder and she'll know her baby's with her.
I've experienced smell as well. When my husband died, there was a distinct smell in the hospital room, and I've smelled that since. And his dad told me that he also smelled that. So that's one that I've experienced. And then number five is partial and full appearances. And you saw your loved one in your dream. Have you seen a vision of someone while you're wide awake, or is it just dreams for you?
Dreams, yeah. Yeah.
Hmm.
Well, I mean, I was in, was I was awake and asleep and at twilight, when all this went on with my loved one, that I saw full, not just partial.
Yes, definitely.
Uh, like I said, Bill Guggenheim explains it's better on the link that I gave you.
A glimpse beyond. Let's see what this one means. Number six, unlike full or partial appearances, which may feel like the departed is appearing in the same room as you, visions are more like glimpses into the great beyond. Hmm. Have you had something like that?
I'm not sure if that was that one that he talked about or another one, but after my after death communication, I had a dream, and Bill talks about this, that you might go with your loved one someplace that he is. And I did. I felt like I was there with him, holding his hand. We were walking through this beautiful garden. And I think that is one of the examples that Bill gave, where you go to them and there where they are now and do something with them. And we were walking in this beautiful garden together. It was very peaceful. But
That is, it sounds like a very beautiful experience.
yes,
Encounters in the alpha state. Now, I think this is what you're talking about, where you're in that twilight. Is that what it is? Yep.
not sure which one it
I've
is.
had many experiences in the alpha state as well. And then, let's see, number eight is more than a dream. And I think that's what you were talking about, where you were
I
like,
think mine kind of goes into several of the realms he talks about. Oh yeah, it was not a dream. It was real. It was, like I said, it's as real as me looking at you.
mhm.
Although
I've had,
you're on a computer monitor, but it's the same thing, you know. I mean,
right. No, I understand what you're saying because I've had those dreams too, where you wake up and it just felt like you were right there with them.
yeah,
It's a visit, what I call it is a visitation dream.
yeah,
And I've had several with my dad and I've had several with my husband. And it just feels like you're right there with them. Sometimes I know that they have died and I'm wondering what they're doing here. I'm like, why are you here? I thought you died. And then other times we're having a beautiful experience, like a picnic together, and it just feels like I'm
yeah,
in heaven.
yeah. That's what I felt like when I was in the garden with him after
Yeah.
he died. Yeah, yeah.
And then out of body ADCs. Let me read what ADC means.
ADC is after death communication.
Oh, okay, you
It's
got
what
it.
he termed that term. I mean, he came up with that term, after death communication. He calls it ADC. Yeah,
Okay, so now have you had an out of body ADC?
I did when I had the brain tumor. When I was looking down at my body laying there, and I could tell you exactly who was where and when and what they said and everything. Because the thing is, I was an operating room nurse and I picked the anesthesiologist I want. So I knew all these people, but I could hear what they were saying. I was under anesthesia, but I could see myself laying there and I could hear the surgeon say, you know, because somebody had braided my hair because he was just going to shave the back of my head because my brain tumor is in the back of my head. So he's going to shave the back of the head. And he goes, "Who did this?" And I remember hearing him say that. But I was under anesthesia and I was looking at him shaving my head. I mean, you know,
Yeah, it's our consciousness is so interesting. I've had many out of body experiences, but I never had one until my husband died. And then shortly after he died is when I started having them. And I definitely feel like he had something to do with that. Like he was trying to show me that he still existed or that we didn't even need our bodies to exist.
exactly, exactly.
And then phone calls. That's interesting. I've heard about phone calls. I've never had one, but I've heard that it happens pretty frequently.
Yeah. Yeah. He talks about, you know, the phone rings and you pick it up and, you know, there's a, you know, your loved one, you know, and that's one that's very rare and really hard to imagine, but it has happened. He interviewed people that it happened to.
hmm I actually talked to someone recently who had a phone call from their departed aunt.
Mm-hmm.
Their
Mm-hmm.
aunt had called and spoke to him on the phone. Material matters, lights going on and off. This happens to me still frequently. Does this happen to you?
Things will fall and I'll go, "Did you do that?" You know, because it's like he's letting you know he's there, you know.
And here's some examples so people, my audience can kind of get a feel, and maybe these things will happen for them as well. Lights going on and off, radio changing stations, items inexplicably falling off the shelves,
Mm-hmm.
things like that. Some physical thing that's happening that could be attributed. There's no other reason for it. There's no.
There's no air or anything. Yeah, and yeah, he talks about this too, and a lot of people would just ignore it and think it's nothing, but it could be. You know, it could be a message. You know, and many times I've said, "Did you do that?" You know, but yeah.
And I was less open to that until recently. And then when I became more open to it, that's when I started noticing them more. So it's like, it's almost like you have to be in the frame of mind to receive these communications, and then they come.
Mm-hmm.
And then 12 of 12 is symbols. And I think the birds,
Or the butterflies, the rainbows, all that stuff. Yeah, he talked about how maybe a butterfly will come and lead you someplace. Now there was I saw something on the internet the other day. This bride, uh, the monarch butterflies meant something to her and her dad. So at her wedding, she had a little case and she's going to release all these butterflies to fly away. Because normally butterflies, you know, they you know get their nectar and they fly away. Well, the butterflies flew all over her white dress and they hung there. And that was like a message from her father. He was with her, you know. So a lot of people have things like that happen.
I had something recently happen with dragonflies, and my sister has a very dragonfly or a very symbolic dragonfly vision with my dad. Um, she even got a tattoo of a dragonfly to symbolize my dad's presence. But
Mm,
I hadn't been to Michigan. I was born and raised in Michigan. I grew up there and um, went up there with my brother, who I hadn't seen in decades. And there was just this giant, I don't know what a bunch of dragonflies are called, a flock of dragonflies. And
wow.
when we were just hanging out, and it just made me think of my dad, that my dad was there and he was appreciating that we had gotten together.
Yeah, yeah. But before my loved one had died, I I, I had all these ladybugs all over me one time. You know, and when my dad died, and my brother saw this too. I was holding one hand and my brother was holding his other hand. And we kept seeing these three white birds. I don't know what kind they were, but there was a little window way up in the ICU unit. And they kept flying around, you know, and they were staying there. And his heartbeat started slowing down. And I'm like, oh no, you know. And the minute it stopped, these birds flew up to heaven. I mean, it was just so, yeah. And in fact, I made a film about that. I'm an amateur filmmaker, and I wrote a film about butterflies in heaven. This is years ago. And the way I explained it is you have the caterpillar that cocoons itself, and then it comes out to a beautiful butterfly and flies up to heaven, explaining death to a child. And so a lot of people really liked the movie because it explains death as, you know, you're the caterpillar, and then when you die, your butterfly flies up to heaven, your spirit. And actually, an interesting thing about Bill is he recently died, and he was in the middle of writing another book. He does have a website on Facebook about his book, uh, but and somebody's supposed to be finishing his book. But yeah, um, he he said that he shed his earth suit and flew up to heaven. His spirit's still here.
What great work he's done in hoping to give people peace and comfort
And he was
and
very,
healing.
yeah, very passionate about it. And like I said, he came because I was going to go over there because it's a good hour drive, and he came all the way over here, and I interviewed him here. And you need to watch his. It's not real long, but you need to watch it. Now, in saying that, I'm on there telling my story, and I had to tell it 20 times before I could stop crying. I mean, just like I got emotional here, I had to try to, you know, because I'd waste a lot of tape just sitting there boohooing the whole time. You know? But it's and it still gets to me after all these years. It still gets to me. It's like it just happened.
Yeah. Well, I understand that too because there is no, people say time heals everything. I don't agree with that. I feel like we learn how to live in a different way, but don't necessarily
No,
become completely healed.
no, time doesn't heal everything. It gets less over time. It's just like you've got a scar and it's healing over, but that scab is always there. But you never forget. But yeah, it lessens. I remember when my roommate committed suicide, and that hit me really hard. I remember, and I went to a group about suicide to talk about it. Okay, I remember, and she was talking about the first time you laugh after a loved one dies, you feel guilty, you know, because I felt like, how can I laugh when she's not here? You know, she can't laugh. But I learned that um, it's okay to laugh. And they had talked about, you know, children, you know, dealing with death and how they're not affected the way we are. As you get older, you get more fearful of death, whereas kids, it's not a real thing to them. And so they can be laughing and playing one minute and be sad the next. So I understand that, you know, that it's okay to laugh. It's okay to go on and live. They would want you to go on and live. Um, you always remember them, you know, and like I said, you know, the wound heals, but there's always a scab there. You're always going to remember, but it's not going to, you have to go on, not get over it, but you have to go on with a new reality that you don't have this loved one in your life, you know.
That's exactly right. And I think it's very important to do that, not just for ourselves, but for our loved one on the other side. I think that mourning them too deeply and being unable to let go and move on can hold them back. And I had evidence of that. I had a dream once where I was in this glass waiting room floating in space. And it was like all these people that were in the waiting room with me, they were just mourning deeply. They had these terrible scowls on their face, sad faces, and they were just mourning their loved ones, and their loved ones were surrounding this. My husband was in this crowd that was surrounding this glass viewing room floating in space, and they were so sad. They were so sad watching us, and they couldn't leave because they felt like they couldn't leave us yet. So I think it's important to let go so that they can move on and they can be happy too. And I've heard that from other people since I've started this podcast, that they got messages that their loved ones needed them to let them go and to move on with their life. And that doesn't mean that we're never going to see them again. It means that we just move on with our life.
Right. Yeah. The other thing that this did to me, it made me not fear death, because I know that my spirit is still going to remain. I mean, I hope I'm going to be here for a few more years, but that when I shed my earth suit and my spirit is free, it's going to be with him again. You know, so it's not, death is not an unknown anymore, because it used to be, and a lot of people still, okay, when you die, that's it, lights out, you know, there's nothing there. But there is, because I experienced it. I know he's with me. I know his spirit still remains, and I know that I will join him one day, you know. So I'm enjoying life as I can, and I will see him again one day.
Yeah.
Just hope it's going to be another 20, 30 years from now.
And you're doing such a wonderful work by spreading this good news that we are eternal spiritual beings and you can communicate and they communicate with us. Because that to me is the key to healing, to knowing that they're still there, that they still exist, and that they're happy and they can communicate with us and we'll see them again.
Oh, another story I have to tell you, the film festival I went to that I was so embarrassed to take because I thought people would think I was nuts, I won the biggest award they gave out. And it's interesting what the award is. It is an award, a humanitarian award, after the guy that owned the theater where we have our film festival. He was a pilot, and he was flying, and the tower told him to make a sharp turn, and it was too sharp, and he crashed and he died. This memorial was made for him. It's a humanitarian award, and so it was like, in his death he brought his trophy to me, you know, because I think he wanted the story to be told, that he's still there, you know, he's still in the theater, he's still there, and he gave his award to me. It's a humanitarian memorial award in his name, and my plaque is on it now. They don't
Oh.
let you take the trophy home because it's really big. They give one every year. They pick somebody who's made a film that made a difference, and I mean, I was shocked, absolutely shocked, when I got that award. But
Well, you deserve it. You're doing great work, and thank you for everything that you do. If
you,
my viewers wanted to find you, how can they reach out?
oh, I'm on Facebook all the time. It's under Susan Dontell, not Sue Dontell, because somebody hacked me and I had to make another one. And so I had to go to my birth name, which is Susan Dontell, but I'm there.
If you had one message that you wanted the viewers to take away from this conversation today, what would it be?
It would be, your loved ones are still with you in spirit.
Beautiful. Absolutely beautiful. I definitely want to thank you for being my guest. This has been a great honor for me, and I've enjoyed speaking with you.
Thank you for having me. I've enjoyed talking to you too.
Thank you for being here. I just want to tell you how much I appreciate you being here and supporting my channel. If you haven't already subscribed, please consider subscribing if you enjoy near-death experiences and other spiritually transformative stories. It helps the algorithm know that this information is useful and push it out to more people. And that's the goal, to get as many people to know that we are eternal spiritual beings and that we never die. Our bodies might die, but our essence will never die. And I want people to live with less fear. Let's all spread the word. Like, comment, subscribe, share, hit that little notification bell so you get all the notifications when my videos post. Thank you for all of your support. I'm sending love to you.